and I listen to the human voice musically. And I think that's really the only way you can do it. It's the only way you can really express it. We talk about, like, take the characters in Winnie the Pooh. Okay, the voice of Winnie the Pooh is kind of like a violin. It can be soothing, but it's scratchy, right? So I kind of look at even casting. We look to cast the ensemble kind of in a musical style. Is even within the church, there needs to be a dynamic.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're here again.
We're here
in our beautiful studio. I think for the next 10 episodes, I will rave about this studio because I'm so excited.
I'm waiting for a comment to come in that's like, man, I just listened to it and I don't know what this beautiful studio is. So pressure again.
Pressure again. Watch YouTube. I'm going to tell you at least 3 more times. You've got to check this out on the YouTube channel. But
what are we talking about?
Yeah, we are very excited today. We've got a hot topic, Disney.
Ooh.
Yes.
I love some Disney.
It's a great conversation we're about to have. We all love Disney, right? But first I have to ask, does anybody ever feel like they just monologue and drone on, or their tone is just a little dry? You see everybody's faces just kind of start to gaze out to the stars and daydream a little as you speak.
Shame is entering this conversation.
If you experience that problem, we're going to help you with that today.
Okay.
At least a little bit. We're going to talk about that because we have Rick Dempsey, who has worked at Disney as the senior leader in character voices. So you know he knows his stuff.
He does.
He is a pro.
He's a legend.
But he walks us through story, tone, voice, and shaping everything from animation to ministry, because they really do coincide a lot more than we realize.
Yeah, and I think for those listening and watching this, or they may go, really, are we going to learn from Disney? Like, they're such a woke organization or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say this. Rick Dempsey wore Jesus on his shoulder. He talked about that when he did a keynote at SALT 2025. And it's just so encouraging as we think about guys like Rick who are at Disney shaping so much. So as we think about what he says about creative process and tone and all that, it's definitely somebody worth listening.
Yeah, he's got some gold nuggets for how to live out your faith, even if you don't work in the church, which we know that's not always a community we're talking to, but some of you might be at nonprofits or you might just love our podcast. This applies. This
100%.
works. Yeah.
So nerd moment though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know, a couple weeks ago,
yeah.
Did you know Disney assigned a new
You
CEO?
made me aware of this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So what's so fascinating about this is, Bob Iger. I'm a huge fan of Bob Iger. He has a phenomenal book called The Ride of a Lifetime. It's his story. I'm a nut for like autobiographies of executives, leaders, and culture shakers. Shoe Dog, Phil Knight out there, right? But The Ride of a Lifetime, great book for anybody who wants to read that. But he was at Disney for years and really turned it around, right? He's the reason that Pixar is there. He's the reason that Star Wars is there. He's the reason that Marvel is there. Yeah. 21st Century Fox. So he had so many monumental moments. Anyway, he announced that he was going to step down. Fun fact, he stepped down like 2 weeks before COVID basically hit the United States. I think he knew something. And he appointed the head of parks at the time. So Bob Chapek, who has maybe gone down as one of the most criticized Disney CEOs in history. Right? So he leaves.
Yeah.
And like a year later, they fire him. Bob
guy.
Iger takes it back over.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been this question of, and part of the commitment I think that Bob Iger had when he came back was, I'm going to find a new person to take over.
Yes.
In like a very
He'll have his retirement plan laid out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was only committing like a couple of years because he really wanted to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, fast forward. They announced Josh D'Armo. Guess what? He's the head of parks. So everybody's like, oh no, this is history repeating itself. But there's something interesting, and I don't know if you caught this, but Dana Walden is actually stepping into a brand new role, President and Chief Creative Officer, which a lot of people say is really maybe the like safety net here.
Kind of restructuring a bit to make sure that they're not repeating history.
It's not just a parks person that's going to run the company, because Bob Chapek, I think, really greenlit a lot of like, sequels and like really didn't do much with new intellectual property, which is, if you look at the flywheel of Disney, if you've ever gone back to this, there's a content map that he mapped out like in like the 80s or something. And basically it's like, it starts with a character. Like one of my favorite Disney lines, by the way, and I could talk about this for 20 minutes, so I need to wrap this puppy up, but is Disney used to always say, we don't make movies to make money. We make money to tell great stories. And to make great movies. And so it's fascinating when you say like, okay, the story had to be the killer, central piece. So I'm excited what Dana can bring to the table, but
we center that vision again. Yeah.
Well, and it's like parks. Okay, obviously the parks make all the money, but now you've got Dana who's going to say, no, we're going to champion great creativity.
Yeah.
And so I am excited about what the future is going to look like. But this also ties to one of our core values of collaboration, that like great creativity has to happen in the context of a team. So I'm excited to see that.
It's going to be good.
Maybe they learned a little bit from our
Well, I hope it will be good. We'll find out for sure. Exactly. But well, let's dive into this conversation with Rick, because we're going to get some amazing insights into Disney, into some actor names that you are familiar with, like Robin Williams, Tim Allen. And you've got just some really good questions regarding his faith and ministry while at Disney as well. So let's dive in.
Let's do it. So you spent 35 years at Disney.
I did.
Your role at the peak of it was Senior Vice President of Character Development. Is that right?
Character Voices. Domestic and international.
Yeah. Yes. And you've got a lot in that. You're now working kind of in your own world. You've started your own company and you're doing a lot with The Chosen.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to your time at Disney, and maybe even still a little bit of Chosen, but animation specifically. Okay. I think many people in our audience may be surprised to hear kind of the workflow of that. I've always thought the animation gets done and then you get the voice to kind of come on top, and you were like, no, that's not happening. Walk us through what that process is like.
Yeah, you actually record the voices first, which is really interesting. People don't realize that, but it's the only way that an actor can really get all the ad-lib nuances that they want to do. Think of Robin Williams as the genie, for example, in Aladdin. Yeah. So much of what Robin did was improv.
And that's who he is too. So,
of course. Yeah. And that's why you're hiring Robin Williams, right? So he's going off the page all the time. You've got a script, but then you let him riff. And the only way you could capture those riffs is once you edit it all together, is then you start the animation process, and you can bring all that personality, all the improvisational moments to the animation after you have the soundtrack base of what's been recorded.
But so much of like a scene is to know what's happening in that scene, what's around that scene, who else is in that scene. How do you give those actors that context?
And that's the job of the director, to ensure they understand the context of what's happening in the script. And in animation, they bring in these giant storyboards. They are literal boards. They're 4 feet by 8 feet, massive, and it's just a cork board with all the artist storyboard images with the dialogue underneath kind of written. It's just like a giant comic book.
I know you know Andy Irwin, and we were talking the other day, he and I, and he was telling me about a scene, and I can only imagine where like he knew that the actor, I think it was Dennis Quaid, came in and basically leveled up. You have spent so much of your career thinking about tone of voice and the way in which you inflect. For many in our audience, in our community, they're helping coach their pastors. They may be helping coach on-air talent or on-screen talent. They may be helping coach hosts of a service. How do you help people understand the power of tone, or how do you help people understand the inflection that they bring?
Well, when I spoke in the big session, I mentioned my love for music, and I was a musician, and I listened to the human voice musically. And I think that's really the only way you can do it. It's the only way you can really express it. We talk about, take the characters in Winnie the Pooh. Okay, the voice of Winnie the Pooh is kind of like a violin. It can be soothing, but it's scratchy, right? Eeyore is like an oboe, right?
Yeah.
Tigger is like an electric guitar in your face, wang, high energy. Rabbit, staccato, raspy, kind of like a saxophone.
Or like a drum. Like,
yeah. So I kind of look at even casting. We look to cast the ensemble kind of in a musical style, and I think to your point is even within the church there needs to be a dynamic. In the same way that a good worship band's very different than a bad worship band, right? I think someone just doing announcements brings a certain energy, a certain meter to the score that either creates energy, creates excitement, even with their pitch, with their tempo, which is their excitement. That I think we need to. We need to bring that to the audience in a way that they feel it, they resonate with it, and I think it's key in church. If you get some Eeyore in there, right, just kind of going through the thing, looking at their notes. And I know it happens. And
you can't make a movie with just Eeyore.
You can't make a movie with just
so
Eeyore.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You spent 35 years. You transitioned off, which I can't imagine what that was like. You talked a little bit about that in your session of kind of transitioning and kind of knowing that the Lord was calling you elsewhere. I'm just curious, for someone listening, how did you end your time there well? I mean, 35 years, that's not just something you go, here's my 2 weeks, I'm done. Walk through that process. How did you honor Disney on your way out, and how do you end that season well?
Yeah, I think after 35 years and at the level I had reached, I had a lot of respect for the company. They had respect for me.
Yeah.
There was no way I could just quit over some of the squabbles that I had or some of the convictions I had where the company was at. I could only do that graciously.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way that we're shown grace daily from our Savior, I needed to be gracious in that moment.
Before we get to The Chosen, which I want to talk about as well, one of the things that I think you said to me early on in a conversation when we met was you talked about how you wear Jesus on your sleeve. You did it very boldly through all your years at Disney, that no one ever had to question that Rick Dempsey was a Jesus-believing Christian. Right. Talk about that. You have something that you talk about, like your brand. And it sounds like even as you left, you were very conscious of, if I've worn Jesus on my sleeve, I can't just give 2 weeks because of some convictions. I've got to do this in love, and I've got to do this with grace. So talk a little bit about that brand thing you talked about.
Yeah, it's, I believe, first of all, we need to have brand identity, which is in Jesus, But it was important that I was there for people when they wanted to talk about faith. So I did try to make people aware. I remember talking to the one of the heads of development who ultimately became the president of animation. He had weird artwork in his office, and I just asked him about it and used that as an opportunity just to share the gospel with him. I didn't know how I would respond to that, but it turns out that in the future days, he was adamant that I attended every meeting that the company had creatively when it came to a moral decision. So, and he wasn't a believer at all. In fact, he lived a life that was very much like an unbeliever, and but he was adamant that I had a voice because he respected that. Yeah. So, I think that kind of trickled up, whether that be Bob Iger, the head of the studio, or whatever, the chairman of the studio, knew that I was a believer. And so when these things came up, certainly like Chronicles of Narnia, we had a faith and family task force, and we would sit there and talk about how we could continue to create films that were still appealing to the faith and family community, because we didn't want to alienate them after Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Right.
So we had to sustain that brand identity with them and have brand integrity. We weren't going to do a one-off film and then turn our backs on the faith and family community. Right. So I felt kind of responsible to kind of maintain the brand integrity.
That's neat. That's so cool. All right, so now you're working with The Chosen. Talk a little about kind of the work you're doing with them and how that story came to be.
Yeah, super exciting. I shared it in the main seminar. But boy, I had announced my retirement, went off to, no, actually I had not announced my retirement. I was praying about it, went off to Hawaii, got a shave ice, sat on a bench. A guy showed up that I had no idea, some complete stranger. We just struck up a conversation and found out that he was a believer, and I shared, some of my highs and lows at Disney, and he said, let's stay in touch. So it was that guy I met over shave ice. He was in a meeting with the team at Come and See, which is the founding organization that owns The Chosen, and they bought the IP and they didn't know how to get it out around the world. And this guy was sitting in that meeting, and he said, I know a guy.
So he was part of what the Greens, Hobby Lobby, had kind of funded Come and See Foundation. This guy that you met in Hawaii just happened to later be on that team.
He's actually, he's connected with the parachurch ministry. They're doing great work.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, very random.
Yeah.
And I had done all the international voices for Disney as well. We didn't talk about that. But as a result of that, this guy knew that I had the inroads into that part of the world. A lot of people don't know how to adapt a script and translate it and dub it. So they just said, we don't know how to do this. And he says, I know a guy. I had a shave ice with him in Hawaii. So that's how it all came about. And that was after I had already announced my retirement.
Isn't it amazing how the Lord works, that all that comes, and you took a leap of faith.
Yeah.
You jumped off without a parachute, like you said, and then the Lord says, I got you.
Yep.
I know exactly. And I think there's sometimes encouragement there of like, trust that the Lord's got you.
Totally.
Whatever that is, whether it's leaving or not. I mean, it's, obviously for your story, that's leaving, but take a risk. Can you show the Lord, I want to trust you and place myself in a place where I'm so dependent and necessary to have you intervene.
Yeah.
What a great place to find
yourself.
yourself.
It was really God's story. I mean, there's no way you could. I was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with not a care in the world other than thinking I was going to leave Disney to meet a guy who just, at 11:30, before lunch, I had the shave ice. So it's just God's timing of it all. It's truly amazing.
It's cool. And I want to talk about The Chosen in this brief time we have left. Mm-hmm. You and I were talking about this, that like The Chosen's done something pretty crazy in the entertainment space. It's done something pretty crazy in the faith space. Yeah. Talk about that. What has that unlocked? What's changing in the atmosphere of entertainment industry, Hollywood, et cetera, because of the success of The Chosen?
It's really cool, isn't it? I think we're opening up a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing Christian entertainment, which we have fallen behind a little bit in Christian entertainment. And I think The Chosen and other things like what the Irwin brothers are doing are bringing back the high-quality, story-driven entertainment that we need by Christian filmmakers. Yeah. I think that's incredible. And I think Dallas is doing just a phenomenal job. Dallas Jenkins is doing a phenomenal job with The Chosen in the way that it's written and the way that it's directed. And the quality of that show has shown Hollywood that a quality Christian faith-based show can actually work.
Yeah.
I think if you would have said 5 years ago before The Chosen first came out, people said, it'll never fly. I think that was kind of the attitude when they shot that first episode. Yeah, this will be good for a couple episodes, But boy, we've proven that quality will out.
Quality will, and I think you and I were talking early. Well, way back about the idea that 10 years ago, there were way more ideas than there were resources to pull off some of these ideas in Christian entertainment. And now that's kind of flipping, right?
It is.
Studios, Lionsgate is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into faith-based films.
Yeah.
You've got the Come and See Foundation that's funding this. I mean, you've got, just like back in the Renaissance era, you've got these wealthy families that are trying to help pour into faith-based art to then help bring people back to the church. And it's this beautiful cycle. Do you want to talk at all about that? And
I think that the main thing to understand is the mentality. As soon as you go into a business mentality of, I got to make a certain amount of return on my investment. What I like about Mark Green, his attitude is just, no, my return on investment is souls.
Yeah.
As a believer, we're going to use our resources because if I'm doing a version of The Chosen in Tigrinya, I'm telling you, there's not going to be a commercial return on the investment, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully we're going to reach people,
yes,
the lost for Christ. And that's Mart's vision in translation, is to get this out to 1 billion people.
So
we hopefully get to 2 billion by 2033. I can't believe that's coming up. And we're hoping to reach billions of people with this show. And again, that's not a financial return on investment.
Totally. But you were able to almost use the Western North American return on investment cash-wise to help fund the global soul
you got it.
Return on investment.
That's exactly it, yeah. So that's pretty cool. So you can see it from a commercial producer perspective that the faith community is there. People want to see these types of films, but the quality's got to be there. They'll reject it if the quality's not there.
100%.
We're in competition with the Disneys.
Excellence is kind
Universal.
of like the world's language. Like if it's
really
not there, you're not going to be able to speak
it.
All right, last question for you. You work in the church, or you don't work in the church, but you're very involved in your church, very plugged in. A lot of our community work day in and day out in the church. Mm-hmm. I've always said that I think that art is the language of the invisible. Mm-hmm. I think it can transcend words, pastors' moments, spoken words, even written words, sometimes, even though those are creative works. Mm-hmm. What would you leave this community with in just encouraging them how story and art could help propel the gospel and maybe more through the local church?
Well, first of all, we're such a media-saturated society now that people are getting their stories from media. Books are one thing. I know people still read books, but all our youth are they're holding their phones and they're looking at media on their phones. What a great opportunity to use that as an evangelical tool. Yeah. To not cram the gospel down anybody's throat, they'll just turn it off if you do that. Yeah. But to tell great stories of high quality that are inventive, that are creative, that will attract people, and hopefully they'll get the message. And we've got letters from guys in the Taliban who have been saved from watching The Chosen. It's unbelievable. So we're able to get in and expose people because of the stories that we're telling. Whether it would be with The Chosen or Christians in general, I think art has that effect on people.
Rick, I love having this conversation. I'm so grateful for the time that you've poured into this community. I love how bold you are with your faith and how you just want to help encourage other artists and creatives to tell great stories for the church. So thank you for being here, my friend.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
That is such a great conversation with Rick, and there is so much we could dive into. So much to unpack, so much to just drill in, which I love.
And that was a little glimpse of the full interview.
Oh, yeah, that was not the full interview. But I want to go back to sort of the beginning area of his interview. I love what he says about tone.
Yeah.
I love how he compares the voice to instruments and the exact examples of characters like Eeyore and Pooh that he chooses.
Like an orchestra, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But I love the science of what happens in the brain when tone is engaging. Basically, the science is this. You hear tone before your brain computes words. I think we've all seen the art of how the right hemisphere of the brain is the creative artistic one. The left hemisphere is the logistic, analytical side, the mathematical side. That is how your brain interprets words as well. The right side understands tone before the left side understands the words.
It's almost like you feel something before you learn something.
Yes.
Or you know something, right?
And there are studies shown, and I will link these studies in the show notes if you are a nerd in Enneagram 5 and you want to dive really deep into it. But when the right hemisphere picks up the emotion, it hears trustworthiness, confidence, warmth. It picks up those emotions within 300 to 500 milliseconds, which is teeny tiny. You don't even compute how quickly you're picking up the emotion before you hear what someone is saying.
Yeah. Well, it's true. When you have an interview with somebody or you meet somebody for the first time or you go on a first date or something, you may not necessarily remember what you talked about, but you definitely remember the feeling, right?
Yes.
You remember the way that you felt. And I think that that's so imperative in our context in the church, because whether it's a stage announcement, whether it's a sermon that a pastor is preparing, whether it's the way in which you're pitching an idea or you're throwing some event to try and reach outsiders, they're going to remember how they felt.
Talk about authenticity, too.
Yes.
Your tone better be authentic.
Yeah. And inviting.
Yes.
And trust comes more probably from emotion than it does the words you say. I mean, you and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, but you're a writer, right? And so you actually have to figure out how to put tone into written. And this isn't just something that's verbal. Talk a little about that.
Oh, my word. So many ways. The way you format a page, the way you italicize, bold, indent, the way that you're choosing your words. I mean, I tell every writer that I talk to, read your pages out loud. It's like Shakespeare. Some things are meant to be heard. Some things are meant to be read. Shakespeare is meant to be heard, not read, because the tone matters in what he is saying.
Yeah.
It's how it's interpreted. But yeah, writing is the same way. There are things it's supposed to be read, not heard. And so you have to find those ways to translate tone.
Yeah.
I love picking out when it's all caps. When something's italicized, maybe you're putting 3 empty spaces, or maybe your chapter is 1 word, like the verse, "And Jesus wept."
Yeah.
People know it because it's so short. That is tone in writing.
Yeah.
In many ways.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me in that conversation that I pull out the most is when we talked about excellence, right? And I know I said this in the interview with him, but I really do believe that excellence is kind of the gold standard of cultural communication.
Yes.
People don't reject truth. They reject bad craftsmanship, or they reject something that's told in a way that just doesn't translate or doesn't affect us. I mean, we only share virally the things in life that we're like, that's good. Yeah. That's great. That's insightful. That's different. That's novel. That's new. And I think that that's so important for us in the church. And I love that he connected it to The Chosen, because you and I have talked about this a ton, that because The Chosen is done so well, it has this opportunity to transcend culture. It has a chance to sort of travel everywhere because of the skill of that.
And if you watch the full interview, I know you two talk a lot longer about that, on how a lot of Christian media, when it is excellent, it's considered art by other cultures and not Christian propaganda.
Yeah.
And so it's allowed into certain countries that it wouldn't be before because it's done with excellence.
Totally.
It's mind-blowing. Go watch the full interview on YouTube. It's amazing.
So if we're trying to put a story out, obviously there's certain things that we create in the church that are just for sort of our community. And I don't want to say that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be excellent. But when people understand your mission or vision and they resonate with it, authenticity is far more important, right? Tone is more important.
Still reaching your community.
So it doesn't have to be perfect, right?
So it's
imperfection,
still excellence.
Yeah. But I do think when we're trying to reach outsiders, I think excellence is something that we need to double down on and not just kind of fly over. Like, is this good enough? Is this something that the world would respect before we try and make a mission or a statement or a preachable moment?
Such a good filter before you hit that publish or post button. Is this done with excellence? Maybe not perfection, but excellence.
All right, land the plane for us. What do we got coming up?
All right, ticket sales are opening this week for SALT 2026 conference. We've got a lot of people be like, hey, when can we buy these tickets? When is it happening?
Ticket sales for a bit.
Yeah, it's happening. It is this week. So check out salt2026.com or, sign up for our email list if you haven't. Then you'll know everything happening. And then there is also a SALT community website just with everything that happens there. So
new platform.
Just want to plug that too.
You can get Rick Dempsey's keynote that we talked about from SALT 2025.
The main stage keynote.
Yeah.
And then just a reminder, I know we've just said it a few times, the main stage keynote will be on SALT Community, but the full interview that you just heard, the full version, will be on YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel, just check that out.
Let's do it.
Otherwise, we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See ya.